Hello friend, welcome to Stories by Tocci. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please don't forget to hit the like button, please share, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Now let's get into the story. The sun rose slowly over the town of Noko, casting long golden shadows across cracked walls and dusty verandas. Roosters called with stubborn confidence from backyard coops, while women stirred a bono soup over coal pots, slapping the lids as if to hush the bubbling. But in one compound nestled behind a chapel and a carpenter's shed, a boy named Udo swept the cement corridor, careful not to raise too much dust. He was 16 that year, but already bore the quietness of a man twice his age. His sisters, Amaka, Chisholm, and Gozi, took turns shouting his name whenever they needed something. Udo, fetch water. Udo, tie this wrapper for me. Udo, beg help me plait this part. Their voices were not cruel, just busy, and their demands weren't insults, just habits formed in a home where their mother, Mama Elo, had raised 4 children alone since their father died in a road accident on the way to Owari. Udo didn't mind the chores or the teasing. He liked the rhythm of it. He preferred sweeping to talking, fetching to arguing. It was a world where everyone had a role, and he knew his. Mama Elo, though small in frame, had the voice of a choir and the strength of a man who worked the fields. She was a woman of fire and scripture, her Bible often lying open beside the kerosene lamp as she stirred beans or fried akara for breakfast. She taught her children with her hands as much as her words. When Udo wept during his father's burial, she did not hush him. "Let the boy cry," she told the pastor. "The world will teach him to hide tears. Let him be free in my house." From that day, Udo was never punished for feeling too deeply. His mother's words became the soil in which his tenderness grew. He became the one who noticed when someone's eyes were swollen from crying, the one who remembered birthdays without reminders, the one who kissed Mama's hands every Sunday morning before church. His softness wasn't a mistake, it was cultivated. Yet outside their gate, in the real world where men were taught to harden their hearts like Yam and Harmattan, Udo was misunderstood. Some said he was too gentle for a boy. Others whispered that Mama Elo had turned him into a house girl in trousers. But Udo walked through it all with silent dignity, never needing the approval of those who could not see the strength it took to remain kind in a cold world. The compound where Udo lived was always alive with noise. Children from neighboring houses chased each other around, kicking old slippers like footballs, while women exchanged gossip over basins of soaked laundry. Udo knew everyone, knew whose mother sold chin-chin in front of the school gate, who had failed their WAEC 3 times, and which uncle had not returned since Christmas 2 years ago. But he kept to himself, like a book that preferred to stay closed unless someone truly wanted to read. His best friend, if he had one, was his eldest sister Amaka, who sometimes sat with him under the guava tree after dinner. She was the only one who asked him questions about what he felt, not just what he did. "You think too much," she told him once, "but thinking is not bad. Just don't let it stop you from living." He never forgot those words. They became a thread in his spirit, something he often pulled at during quiet evenings or sleepless nights. Though his sisters bickered with him daily, they all loved him in that unspoken, rough-edged way common in African homes, love wrapped in sarcasm, scattered slaps, and extra pieces of meat hidden in the corner of a plate. School was another world altogether. Udo moved through it like a ghost. His classmates mocked his quiet voice and the way he helped female teachers carry their handbags to the staff room. He was the boy who apologized too quickly, who never raised his hand in class even when he knew the answer. Once, during a group project, he made the poster, wrote the summary, and let the group leader read it all out as if it were hers. When a girl named Adaoma thanked him after class, he only smiled and said, "It's better that she got the praise. She needed it more." That was Udo, always seeing behind the surface. He felt things people didn't say, noticed cracks behind every loud laugh. But he never said much, and so the world never knew how much lived inside him. One time, during morning devotion, a teacher asked them to quote their favorite scripture. While others recited verses about enemies falling and cups running over, Udo quietly whispered, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." The teacher didn't hear him. Nobody did. But he didn't need them to. He carried that scripture in his chest like a secret prayer, a whisper from God reminding him that gentleness was not weakness. It was a language only the broken could understand. By the time he turned 23, Udo was no longer a boy, but not yet the kind of man the world called strong. He was soft where others were sharp. He cooked when others boasted. He waited when others walked away. The girls in town didn't see him. Not really. They admired the brash ones, the ones with loud motorcycles, blaring speakers, and thick wallets. But Udo remained invisible to them, his goodness hidden beneath layers of silence and calm. His sisters, now grown and working in different corners of Noko, still treated him like their younger brother. Mama Ilo had grown tired eyes and a soft limp in her left leg, but she still cooked for him whenever he came home, still called him my piece when others made her angry. It was during one of those visits, one quiet evening when the sky turned amber and birds flew in crooked lines over the roofs, that Udo first heard of the girl named Eva. Amaka mentioned her name casually, saying, "There's a new girl renting at Auntie Nkoyo's flat. Tall, fine girl. They say men line up for her like she's a government contract." Udo had laughed then, not knowing that this name, Eva, would soon become a fire wrapped in silk, and that his soft heart, carefully shaped by years of love and loss, was about to be tested like never before. It was a Tuesday morning when Udo first laid eyes on her, not during a moment of magic, but while helping an elderly woman load a sack of cassava into her wheelbarrow. She stood across the road, leaning against a tall mango tree like she belonged to it, as though the air was bending itself around her curves. Her skin had the quiet polish of well-kept bronze, her eyes almond-shaped and unbothered, scanning the people with an ease that made them nervous. Udo paused, his hands still gripping the barrow handle. For a second, he forgot the weight of the cassava sack, the heat of the sun, even the dust tickling his nostrils. He watched as she adjusted her dark glasses and crossed the road in long, unhurried strides, her shadow stretching like a story across the red sand. When she passed by him, she gave him a look, not a smile, not a frown, just a look that said, "I know you're watching." And then she was gone, into the narrow path beside Mama Rita's provision store. It wasn't the way she looked that disturbed Udo, though she was easily the most striking woman he had seen. It was the silence she left behind, a silence that felt like an unasked question. He didn't ask around immediately. That wasn't his way. Udo preferred things to unfold naturally, the way Harmattan rolls in without warning, yet is always expected. But Eva didn't stay in the shadows for long. Within a week, she had become the name on everyone's lips, from meat sellers to motorbike riders. "She no dey talk too much," one vendor said, "but she sabi enter man eye." Rumors wrapped around her like silk. Some said she came from Enugu. Others claimed she had lived in Lagos before something happened that made her move to Noko. But no one knew for sure. Her story came in fragments, like torn pages from a diary thrown to the wind. Udo found himself noticing when she passed his street, timing his walks to coincide with her visits to the market. They never spoke until the day she stopped in front of his mother's gate, looking lost. "Please, is this 17B, Agwu Street?" she asked, her voice as calm as a resting lake. Udo blinked, nodded, and pointed to the next house. "That's the one," he replied. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that barely lifts the corners of the lips but leaves something behind anyway. And just like that, she was gone again. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions bloomed like wildflowers, slow, unexpected, often unnoticed by others. Udo began seeing her at the cafe near the post office, usually seated alone, sipping Zobo from a glass like it was fine wine. The second time they spoke, it was over a book. She had picked up a copy of Things Fall Apart from the shelf and frowned slightly, as if disappointed. "You've read this?" she asked, not looking at him. Udo, surprised by her question, nodded. "Yes, twice. Achebe didn't just write a story, he wrote a warning." She tilted her head slightly, amused. "You speak like someone who feels too much." He smiled awkwardly. "That's what my sisters say too." And so the wall between them began to lower. Udo didn't force his presence on her. He didn't flood her with compliments or perform the dance of desperate men. He simply existed near her, listening when she spoke, never interrupting, never pressing. Eva began to call him soft boy playfully, not knowing that the softness she teased was forged in grief, shaped by discipline, and rooted in love. For Udo, it wasn't flirtation, it was connection. And for Eva, it wasn't attachment, it was curiosity. She would call him sometimes, always at odd hours. Sometimes at 9 p.m., other times at noon, once even at dawn, asking if he wanted to meet for a walk, or just sit outside and talk. They sat under the breadfruit tree by the community hall, watching Kiki riders speed past, the air thick with jollof rice and exhaust fumes. Eva talked about cities she had lived in, jobs she had quit, and people who had disappointed her, but never too much. Always a little, like she was testing the weight of each word before letting it fall. Udo listened like a priest behind a curtain, attentive, non-judgmental, gentle. He didn't ask for her past, didn't question the names she dropped carelessly, Ben, Mickey, Jay. When she mentioned a man who used to send her money from the UK, Udo only nodded. He never showed jealousy. Only once did he ask, "Why don't you ever ask me for help?" She looked at him for a long moment before replying, "Because you're not like them. You feel like home, not a transaction." That sentence wrapped itself around Udo's ribs like a second skin. He repeated it to himself later that night, his face buried in his pillow. And her voice, he had heard something close to truth. And in her eyes, he thought he saw a flicker of possibility. But Eva was a woman with layers, like an onion dipped in perfume. Each time she peeled one off, a different scent appeared. Sometimes she was playful, leaning into Udo's jokes, laughing until her eyes wrinkled. Other times, she was distant, vanishing for days without explanation, her phone always on silent, her voice messages cold and clipped. Udo told himself it was her way. She had known too much freedom to fit into any mold. He tried not to overthink, though the space she left behind each time she disappeared tugged at him like a thread unraveling his peace. People began to talk. A man named Kunnel, who worked at the barber shop, mentioned seeing Eva in the back seat of a tinted car one evening. "That girl Day everywhere," he muttered. Udo didn't respond. He never did. His heart was already entangled, and no rumor was sharp enough to cut through the web of hope he had spun around her. The heart, after all, does not ask for permission to fall. It simply falls and hopes there's something soft at the bottom. For Udo, that softness was the version of Eva he saw in quiet moments, the one who rested her head on his shoulder during bus rides, or the one who said, "I don't know what this is, but it feels calm." And so he waited, not knowing that calm can sometimes be the silence before a storm. It was a strange kind of closeness they shared, like a bird that perches on your window every morning but never flies inside. Udo, in all his softness, had never known affection this unpredictable. One day, Eva would call him with urgency in her voice, asking if he was free to meet. She'd sit close, press her palm into his, and speak as if she had nowhere else to be. She'd talk about how tiring it was to always be the one people admired, but never truly understood. She'd say things like, "They love my face, but they never ask about the rest of me." And Udo would sit silently, his chest heavy with empathy, watching her eyes flicker like candles threatened by breeze. But the next day, she could be gone, unreachable. Her number would ring without answer. Her door, when he knocked, would stay closed. And when she returned, sometimes after hours, sometimes after days, she'd wave it off with the kind of nonchalance that made Udo question if he had imagined the intimacy altogether. "I've been busy," she'd say with a shrug, her voice empty of apology. Udo never pushed. He'd smile and nod, even as something inside him folded again, like a letter never meant to be read. Gradually, Eva's name began to float through the town like incense, sweet to some, heavy to others. Udo started noticing patterns. A man named Kinachukwu, a known electrician in the area, began appearing in the same places where Eva often hung out. There was also Tall Jede, a gym instructor who always had his car radio loud enough to shake the dust off palm fronds. Eva never hid them. In fact, she mentioned them by name occasionally, but always with vague definitions. "He's just someone I know," she'd say. "He helped me fix my water tank." Or, "He just bought me lunch, nothing serious." It wasn't what she said that bothered Udo, it was what she didn't say. There were evenings when he'd sit across from her in a local bar, watching her phone light up again and again, only for her to flip it face down without checking. And once, just once, he saw her smile at a message and tuck the phone away with a look she never wore when speaking to him. It was in that moment, between a sip of malt and the buzz of laughter in the room, that something sank in Udo's chest. A dull, quiet realization that perhaps love had chosen him, but it hadn't chosen Eva. Still, Udo held on. Not because he was naive, but because he was hopeful. Hope, after all, can be both healing and hazardous. It warms the body in the cold, but it can also blind it in the fire. He believed in growing love slowly, like a garden tended with patient hands. And even though Eva's attention shifted like a shadow at dusk, he continued to show up. He brought her fried plantain in brown paper wraps. He fixed the loose socket in her living room, bought her a new kettle when her old one broke. He even offered to help pay part of her rent when she mentioned that her friends had been slow with their usual generosity. She refused, with a smile too rehearsed. "No, Udo. You're different. I don't want your money. You're the only one that makes me feel soft." That statement alone was enough to keep Udo anchored. He repeated it in his mind like a verse, "You make me feel soft." It played in his ears when doubts whispered. It soothed him when he woke up to find her calls hadn't come, again. But love, when not returned in full, becomes a burden instead of a blessing. The tension began slowly, first in their conversations. Eva grew impatient with Udo's concern. "Why do you always want to know where I've been?" she snapped one evening, after coming back late from what she described as a quick visit to a cousin. Udo didn't accuse her of anything. He had simply asked if she was all right. But in Eva's world, even care could feel like a trap. Then came the excuses, canceled plans, missed calls, days where she claimed she had been too tired, too busy, or that she had simply forgotten. Udo found himself shrinking. He spoke less, smiled less. His soft heart, so open, so unguarded, was beginning to bend under the weight of uncertainty. His sisters noticed. Amaka pulled him aside one Sunday after service, wiping her sweaty forehead with a tissue. "Udo," she said gently, "you're not yourself. Don't let a woman make you forget who raised you." He said nothing. He couldn't. Because how do you explain to someone that you've poured yourself out and still feel unseen? That you're dancing with someone who always keeps one foot out the door? At night, he began to pray, though not with words. Just silence. A silence filled with the unspoken plea that somehow Eva would see him, not as one of many, but as the only one. He still believed that love could transform. But he was starting to realize not all gardens want to be watered. The afternoon heat clung to everything like sweat-soaked linen, restless, unforgiving. Udo sat by the window in his room, eyes fixed on the alley outside where children chased each other barefoot, their laughter sharp like broken glass in silence. He held his phone loosely, staring at the screen. Eva's last message was 3 days old. Going to Enugu for the weekend. Will call you when I'm back. She hadn't. Not even a missed call or a half-hearted emoji. Udo's thumb hovered over the dial icon, but he stopped himself. He didn't want to be the kind of man who chased shadows. He didn't want to beg for time or space or love that should come freely. But something inside him itched, the kind of itch that didn't sit on the skin, but beneath it, gnawing. He got up, walked to the table, and sat before his Bible. It had become his only companion lately, one that didn't answer, but always knew how to listen. The pages opened to a verse he hadn't underlined, but read as if it had been waiting for him. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. Proverbs 13, verse 12. He closed the book slowly. The sickness had arrived. On the fourth day, she appeared, unexpected, unannounced, and dressed as though nothing had happened. Her steps were light, almost rehearsed, and she smiled like someone who had already forgiven herself for the damage she hadn't acknowledged. Udo watched her from the doorway of his home. She waved, called his name, and asked if she could come in. Of course, he said, moving aside like a man who still believed the house wouldn't catch fire just because it had once survived lightning. She dropped her bag on the couch and stretched. Enugu was mad, she said. I'm so tired. He watched the way she avoided his eyes, how her tone lacked the tremble of someone who missed him. You said you'd call, he said quietly. Eva rolled her eyes slightly. Udo, please. I was overwhelmed. Do you know how stressful that place was? You act like I'm married to you. That sentence hung in the air like a slap that never landed. He didn't respond. He simply sat down, the silence between them expanding like a lung. She looked at him and said, Why are you so sensitive all the time? It's like you feel things too loudly. Udo blinked. Is that a bad thing? She shrugged. Sometimes, yeah. It's exhausting. That night, Udo couldn't sleep. He lay on his back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, where a dead mosquito clung to a cobweb in one corner. The room felt colder than usual, though the fan hadn't stopped spinning. He kept replaying the way Eva dismissed him, how she had folded his feelings like old receipts, unneeded, disposable. He remembered the early days, when she looked at him like he was a safe place. How had they arrived here, where even his softness was weaponized against him? In the quiet, his heart felt like an overripe fruit, tender to the touch, on the edge of splitting. He got up, walked outside, and sat beneath the guava tree. The night air brushed against his skin like a mother's cloth wiping away sweat. He thought about love, how it should feel like home, not hunger. He thought about loyalty, about how he had given without ever being asked, hoping that love would fill in the blanks where effort had reached its limit. But now, even his hope felt tired. It sagged under the weight of his patience. He reached for his phone again, opened their chat, and scrolled long messages from him, short replies from her. Voice notes of his voice filled with joy, hers filled with laughter that no longer felt sincere. It wasn't just absence that hurt, it was indifference. The next morning, Udo went to see Amaka. His face was pale, and his walk slower than usual. She took one look at him and knew. Sit down, she said, not asking what was wrong, because sisters know when a brother's silence means sorrow. They sat in the backyard, near the old basin, where they used to wash clothes together as children. Udo spoke slowly, choosing his words like someone trying not to reopen a wound. I think I'm loving someone who doesn't love me back. Amaka didn't interrupt. She let him pour it all, how he waited, how he hoped, how he tried to be enough. When he finished, she reached for his hand. You were raised by a mother who taught you to value people. You carry her heart. But not everyone deserves it, Udo. Some people will drink your kindness like water and still complain they're thirsty. Her voice broke a little. You can't keep bleeding for someone who only sees your wounds as weakness. Udo nodded, his lips trembling. She said, I'm too sensitive. Amaka smiled sadly. That's your gift. Don't let anyone shame it out of you. As he left her house later that afternoon, Udo felt lighter, but also lonelier, because knowing the truth and accepting it were two different storms entirely. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But the rope was already burning through his hands. Udo didn't stop loving Eva all at once. It happened in fragments, like an old wall losing pieces of its paint under relentless rain. One day he stopped waiting for her goodnight messages. Another day, he realized he hadn't dreamt about her in weeks. Then came a morning when her name didn't sting when someone mentioned it. Healing, it seemed, didn't come with thunder or trumpet. It came quietly, like dawn creeping in through the edges of a torn curtain. Udo's routine began to shift. He woke earlier, swept the yard without pausing halfway to think. He started cooking again, not just the hurried jollof rice he used to make when Eva visited, but the rich vegetable soup his mother once taught him, full of scent leaves and quiet nostalgia. He washed his clothes on time, ironed them without groaning, and even changed the torn bedsheet he had refused to replace for months. Slowly, he was becoming himself again, though not the same version. Something had changed. It wasn't hardness. It wasn't bitterness. It was a kind of quiet knowing that sometimes love is not enough, and effort does not always turn stone into bread. When the job offer came, it arrived like a beam of light through dusty glass, small but golden. It was a clerical assistant role at the local government office in Oko Junction. The pay wasn't loud, but it whispered stability. Udo took the job without hesitation, and on his first day, he wore a white shirt that had been hidden deep in his drawer, one he had bought years ago for a cousin's wedding but never got to wear. The office was modest, files piled on metal shelves, a ceiling fan that creaked when it spun, and the smell of paper dust hanging in the air like old perfume. But Udo didn't mind. The work was predictable, and in predictability he found peace. On his third day, he met her. Her name was Lydia. She didn't enter the room. She glided in, quiet and composed, holding a plastic file and a half-eaten biscuit. Her eyes were the color of burnt caramel, her voice soft like rain starting on a zinc roof. She didn't look at Udo as if trying to guess his story. She greeted him like someone greeting a stranger with no intention to probe. "Please, is this where the local forms are submitted?" she asked. Udo nodded and pointed. "Second shelf, blue folder." She smiled. "Thank you." And just like that, she became part of his routine. Lydia didn't ask questions with her mouth. She asked with her presence. She began showing up often, not always for forms, sometimes just to sit in the courtyard during her lunch break. She shared her boiled groundnuts with Udo without asking if he wanted them. She offered him sweets from her bag with the kind of gentle force that refused rejection. Udo didn't talk much at first. He was still learning how to be seen without fear. But Lydia never pushed. She simply listened to whatever version of him he offered that day. One afternoon, he found himself telling her about the first time he made a goosey soup alone. Another day, he told her about his late father's scent, how he used to smell of aftershave and dust. With every small story, Lydia leaned in, not with wide eyes, but with warmth. She didn't laugh at the way his voice cracked when he spoke about things that mattered. She didn't call him too soft. One day, as they sat by the corner table eating corn and coconut, Lydia said, "You know, not many men speak the way you do. Your words feel like water, clean, necessary, never forced." Udo didn't reply immediately. He only looked at her, nodded, and smiled, not the kind that stretched the face, but the kind that lived in the eyes. Meanwhile, Eva was beginning to taste a different silence, the kind that does not comfort, only reminds. The men who once called her in the middle of the night, sent money with heart emojis, or showed up with takeaway food, were no longer calling. One by one, their interest faded. She had grown too used to juggling affections, and now her hands were empty. Her texts were read but not replied. Her photos, once praised with fire emojis, now collected quiet likes with no messages underneath. She reached out to one of them, Big Sam, but he claimed he was traveling. She saw his car the next day, parked at the salon. She texted another, only to be told, "You're too much work, Eva." The words hit harder than she expected. Not because they weren't true, but because she had never been on the receiving end of dismissal. For so long, she had controlled the temperature of every room she entered. Now, even her charm had an expiration date. One night, she walked past Udo's street and saw him from a distance, laughing softly with a girl who looked like she belonged there, her posture gentle, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She couldn't hear what they said, but she didn't need to. Udo's smile told her everything. The sky over Noko had a different color that evening, neither blue nor gray, but the muted hue of an ending that didn't announce itself. Udo walked home with Lydia by his side, both carrying small nylon bags of roasted yam and pepper sauce. The walk was slow, but not awkward. There was a language between them that didn't require constant speech, a rhythm of silence and shared glances, of hands brushing occasionally and not needing to hold. Udo had changed, not in the way that people change clothes, but in the way the earth hardens after too many seasons of rain. Not bitter, just steadier. He spoke less now, but when he did, his words were deliberate, rounded with purpose. Lydia saw him fully, not as a broken man needing to be saved, but as someone who had mended himself carefully, stitch by stitch, breath by breath. "You're always so calm," she said, smiling at him as they crossed the small wooden bridge near his street. Udo looked ahead, then said softly, "I've learned that peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you decide to protect." Lydia nodded, and in her eyes there was no need for further explanation. They reached his compound just as the muezzin's call echoed faintly from across the riverbank. Udo unlocked the gate, and as they stepped into the small corridor lined with potted plants, something caught his eye. A figure standing beneath the mango tree near the far wall, slim, quiet, unsure. Eva. She turned slowly when she heard their footsteps. Her hair was braided down, her makeup minimal, but her face carried exhaustion that powder could not hide. Lydia's eyes met Udo's, and without a word, she walked ahead into the house, understanding, without needing to ask. Udo stood still. His heart did not race. There was no tremble in his hands, no ache in his chest, just a soft patience, like the final note in a long song. "You're looking well," Eva said, her voice hesitant. He nodded. "Thank you." She looked around, swallowed, then said, I was just walking by." It was a lie, of course, and they both knew it. Udo didn't question it. She took a step closer. "I thought maybe we could talk." He studied her for a moment, the nervous shift of her fingers, the faint dark circles under her eyes, the stiffness in her smile. She wasn't there to rekindle anything. She was there because the silence in her life had grown too loud. "I don't think there's much left to say," Udo replied, not unkindly. "Not in the way you're hoping." Eva exhaled, nodding slowly, as if she had expected it. "I know I hurt you," she said. "I thought I had all the time in the world and all the options. I didn't realize," she continued, her voice softening, "that not everyone stays forever when they love you. I thought you would always be there." He looked at her then, not with anger or longing, but with something softer, compassion without attachment. "I was there," he said, "but I also had to learn when to leave." The sentence was gentle but firm, like a closed door that didn't need to slam. Eva smiled faintly. "She seems kind," she said, nodding toward the house. Udo didn't respond. Instead, he said, "You once told me I made you feel soft." She looked down. "I remember. But softness," he continued, "isn't weakness. You have to protect it, not use it. With that, he stepped back, not angrily, but firmly. Eva nodded once more and turned, walking out the gate with slow steps, the sound of her sandals echoing softly in the evening stillness. Inside, Lydia sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping water and flipping through a local newspaper. She looked up and smiled as if nothing had happened outside. And that's what made her different. She didn't need reassurance. She didn't demand explanations. She gave space when space was sacred. Udo sat beside her, let out a long breath, and leaned back against the wall. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He thought about it, not the automatic "I'm fine" people give, but the real answer. And for the first time in months, it came without hesitation. "Yes," he said, "I am." They sat there for a long while, not speaking, just existing together in that soft, golden silence that happens when two people are no longer performing for each other. Outside, a light breeze stirred the plants. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a generator coughed to life, and the smell of fried akara drifted into the air. Udo closed his eyes briefly. He was no longer chasing love that had no room for him. He was no longer pouring himself into holes that refused to hold water. He had chosen peace, and peace had chosen him back. That night, after dinner, Udo stood alone by the window, watching the shadows outside shift beneath the moonlight. He thought of Eva, how she had come like a storm and left like one too. Not evil, just unready. And he thought of Lydia, how she arrived with no demands, no promises, just presence. He opened his Bible again, not seeking a miracle, but a reminder. His eyes landed on a verse that sat quietly, as if it had been waiting. "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46, verse 10. He smiled, shut the book, and turned off the light. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, Udo rested, not because everything was perfect, but because he had learned that some endings are not tragedies. They're just closed chapters in books that were never meant to be finished. And finally, he had stopped rereading the same page. Dear listener, sometimes life hands us people who look like answers but behave like lessons. Udo's story is not just about love. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It teaches us that it's not weakness to love deeply, to feel everything, or to care too much. In fact, that kind of heart is rare in this world. Don't let the wrong people shame you out of your softness. If you've ever given your all to someone who gave you half, don't regret it. You were honest. You were real. And real doesn't lose. It just gets redirected to something better. Be like Udo, heal slowly, choose peace over performance, and know that someone will one day meet you where you are, with no games, no guesses, and no guilt. Remember, love should feel like sunlight, not like a storm you must survive. We thank you for the heart you placed in each listener, hearts that love, trust, feel, and hope, even after they've been bruised. Lord, for everyone who's ever loved someone who didn't see them, we ask for comfort that goes beyond words. Heal the wounds that smiles have hidden. Fill the empty corners where joy used to live. We pray, O Lord, for strength, not just the strength to walk away, but the strength to stay whole in a world that often breaks what's tender. For every listener who is waiting for peace, may peace find them. For those who have been used, forgotten, or misread, Lord, rewrite their story with grace. Bless every Udo listening right now, every soul that feels too deeply, that loves without calculation. May their love be returned without delay. May they be seen, valued, and cherished the way you see and value us. And when the wrong ones leave, Father, let better ones come, not to replace what was lost, but to remind them what they deserve. Let their next chapter be filled with calm, loyalty, clarity, and joy that doesn't make them second-guess themselves. We declare doors open for peace, laughter, and authentic connection. We cancel confusion, delay, heartbreak, and manipulation. We speak rest over every restless heart tonight. In Jesus' mighty name. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. See you again in my next story.